So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our latest Legal Cheek virtual event. My name is Sam Jewell, our Head of Student Engagement here at Legal Cheek, and I'm very pleased to be introducing this afternoon's session, which is another in the series that we're running in partnership with BPP University Law School, exploring all things about the new Solicitors Qualifying Exam, or SQE. So we're in the second year of the SQE now, which we're going to be breaking down for you all very shortly. And today's session is all about whether you should opt for that SQE or its predecessor, the legal practice course, LPC, because we're currently in the transition phase between the two. So I'm pleased to have two legal education and careers experts today to talk to you all about this topic. So firstly, Johnny Hurst, BPP's law school head of outreach and law marketing lead, and also a city law firm partner. So hi, Johnny, welcome to you today.
Lovely to be joining you again, Sam.
So I'm going to be handing over to Johnny to introduce Hilary and do the talk very, very shortly. That will run through until 5 p.m, at which point we'll head over to do a little bit of virtual networking, which is the really interactive part of the event. We can get all of your kind of remaining questions answered face to face. So it's a really great opportunity. And that'll be at 5 p.m, as I just said. So I'll be back up towards the end just to direct everyone where to go. The only final thing from me, and I'm sure many of you are familiar with the Hopin platform now, but just to make sure that your right-hand side bar is set to stage, and we have a chat bar there, so you can pop all your comments and questions. We may well not have time to get to them all, but I'm sure Johnny and Hilary might be able to pick up on a few of those as we go. So just before I do drop off, Johnny, I thought we could first of all contextualize the SQE for those in the audience who are perhaps not familiar, as I know we'll have lots of different audience members at different sort of points in their career stage.
Yes, of course. For around 30 years, the legal practice course was the pathway through which you qualified to be a solicitor. You did your law degree or your law conversion course, then you did the legal practice course, then a 2-year training contract. And that is being phased out over the course of the next few years, and it is being replaced by the Solicitors Qualifying Examination. So what we'll be looking at today is for those students, as Sam said, who are caught, or not caught, who have the benefit of choosing between the two pathways to qualify as a solicitor. And it's quite a complex piece. It's not just a question of choosing between the two routes, it's also a question of about choosing what type of preparation course do I need, A, to pass the exams, and B, for my career. And Hilary and I will be exploring that over the course of the next 45 minutes to an hour.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Johnny. I mean, as a recent LLB graduate myself, I'm very interested to hear everything you've got to say. So I'll drop off now and hand over to you both.
Thank you, Sam. And Sam, if we could just have the slides up, and we'll be away. Brilliant. Well, without further ado, let me introduce my partner in crime tonight, Hilary Chadwick. Hilary, welcome.
Thank you very much. So you can see my name's Hilary Chadwick, and my role at BPP is Head of Law at the Centre at Waterloo, which is where we offer the law conversion course, which we'll be touching on during the course of this talk. By way of background, I was also a solicitor in private practice, but in a high street in the north of England. And I've seen by looking at the chat that I was actually originally from Preston. I can see there's a couple of people from Preston who are tuning in to listen to us this afternoon. So welcome to one and all.
Fantastic.
Especially those from Preston.
And people from overseas as well. I can see we've got representation from all over the world as well. So fantastic. I just wanted to say also, we're delighted at BPP University Law School that we are sharing this platform with Legal Cheek. There's a special dedicated area on the Legal Cheek platform dedicated to the SQE, which we sponsor because we know it's a very, very challenging piece for law students to pick up and work out what is the SQE all about, and all the decisions like, do I do the LPC or the SQE, and what type of course should I do, amongst other things. And hopefully we'll start to unblock some of those difficult areas during the course of the next hour. So what are we going to cover today? Well, we're going to cover what is the SQE in a bit more detail. We're then going to compare it with the LPC, the legacy route, which for some people they can still choose. And then we're going to look at key factors which might put you one way or the other if you could choose between the two. And the key thing to mention here is that no two students would necessarily apply all these factors in the same way. So you've got to work out what is important to you and your career aspirations when it comes to choosing the pathway and the education pathway that we are going to be discussing. And then I think what will be really helpful is we've got 4 case studies for you, and many of you will be able to identify with at least one of those case studies because it may well represent your situation. And Hilary and I will discuss what the advice is that we would give that type of student. And we'd be delighted to answer any questions that come up in the chat. We've had some questions in advance that every so often I think I might ask Sam to just put up on the screen. But without further ado, let's crack on. So Hilary, take us through the LPC pathway, just to put this all into context. This was the legacy pathway through which you could qualify as a solicitor.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Johnny. So yes, the top line depicts the traditional route, the traditional LPC route, and you can see straight away that in order to proceed down this route, you will need either a qualifying law degree or a conversion course, a GDL, the PGDL, or as what we refer to at BPP as the Law Foundations course. So you would need either this qualifying law degree or a conversion course. Then traditionally you would sit the legal practice course. Then you would sit a course, well, during the course of your training contract, you would also do a professional skills course. And then at the end of a 2-year training contract, provided you met the satisfactory character and suitability test, you would be admitted on to the role as a solicitor. So that's the traditional route. And if we compare that to the SQE route, which was available from last year, from November 2021, again, you need a degree or equivalent. So you do need that qualification. And if you have that qualification, you can sit SQE, the Solicitor's Qualifying Exam, Part 1, and provided that you pass that exam, Part 1 exam, you can register and sit Part 2 of the Solicitor's Qualifying Exam. And in order to qualify as a solicitor, you will also need 2 years of qualifying work experience. And we'll be explaining a little bit more about that in due course. And then again, you need to pass this satisfactory character and suitability test that is signed off by a solicitor, and you will be admitted onto the role as a newly qualified solicitor. So that's that's a sort of a very brief compare and contrast of the 2 routes that are available. So, Johnny, who can choose between those 2 pathways?
Well, this is a message that we need to be really careful about how we explain this. So you're going to be in one of 2 camps. You either can choose between the 2 pathways, or you just have the SQE as a route. And generally speaking, if you are in your 2nd year of a law degree, or your final year, or you're a law degree graduate, or you're a conversion course graduate, generally speaking, you will be able to go either down the LPC or the SQE route. However, if you are a 1st year student, if you're currently a non-law undergraduate, or if you're a graduate with a non-law degree but haven't yet started your law journey, or if you're a master's student with a non-law degree, even an LLM student not doing a law degree that incorporates the core practice areas, or the core academic areas of a law degree, even master's students aren't eligible for the LPC. So generally speaking, the way to think about it is, if you started your law journey before 2022, you're on the left-hand side. You can do either the LPC or the SQE. If you haven't started your law journey yet, or only started it in 2022, then you do the SQE. So should we talk about what the LPC is then, and then we'll talk about the SQE. So Hilary, take us through the LPC, and it's cunningly divided into 2 stages, stage 1 and stage 2. So let's deal with stage 1, shall we?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, and I imagine a few people on the call are familiar with this. And as you say, there are 2 stages to it. So part 1 is probably the most important part of the course, because it's the stage that focuses on the core practice areas, which will complement your undergraduate studies or your conversion studies. So you can see there's business law and practice, civil and criminal civil and criminal litigation, property law and practice, all of which we'll come across again shortly when we look at what's on the SQE. And these modules, these core modules, are supplemented by a whole host of skills such as advocacy, interviewing and advising, drafting, legal writing, etc. And then there are other core subjects which you will see in the third box on the right hand side, which include accounts, wills and probate, which again we'll see when we look at the SQE regime. But the critical thing is that these subjects build on your PGDL or LLB knowledge, that black letter law that you study, and you get the practice element on the legal practice course. So that's stage one.
And of course, they're all compulsory, aren't they?
They are all
there's
compulsory.
no choice. There's no choice. You have to do them all. And absolutely, there's very good reason, because they are really core to any future solicitor. So how does that compare to stage 2?
Well, in stage 2, you get to choose 3 elective options. And as you can see from the range of elective options that you can see on the screen, you should choose those where you think you want to end up in practice. And, you know, we offer a huge range of elective options, probably more than any other provider. And this optionality is one of the key differences between the LPC and the SQE, because on the SQE, there is no optionality, there is no elective choice. One of the things that you may consider when you're weighing up which route to go down is to think about, you know, these optional modules, you know, what advantage it will give you. So that's really what I would say about the elective modules that we offer at BPP. Is there anything else you want to add to that, Johnny?
Just a few minor points, really. That obviously this is what BPP has to offer. Every LPC provider offers slightly different electives, but the key thing is you choose 3 of the electives offered by that particular provider, and generally with us you can mix and match most combinations. You don't have to pick from any one box, or you can pick 1 from each, 3 from each, or a combination, bar 1 or 2 combinations that don't make sense from a career perspective. So that's the electives. And as Hilary said, I just want to make it really clear, the core SQE syllabus does not include any of this specialist learning. And therefore, as Hilary said, what might be important to you is to get that core learning, because maybe the type of law firm you're going to specializes in some of these areas and would really appreciate that additional knowledge before you join them. So that's the SQE.
No, that's the LPC,
Sorry,
Johnny.
So the LPC. Yeah, I'm jumping ahead. So what is the SQE? So I'm going to break this down into 2 parts. So firstly, we're just going to show you some of the content for SQE1. Hilary, tell us a little bit about this.
Yeah, so you'll see those white the subjects that are in white, or you know, they are effectively contract law and tort law. Then you'll see the English legal system and constitutional law, land law, trusts and criminal law there, those subjects that we are showing at the moment. And you'll recognize those either from your LLB studies, or if you've done a conversion course, those will be the subjects that you have studied on your conversion course, and they're known as the functioning legal knowledge subjects. So those are those core subjects that you will either have got from your undergraduate studies or your conversion course.
And then we have a separate set of modules.
We do. We have some additional subjects that we've just appeared on the screen. And as I mentioned when I was talking about the LPC, you'll see that there are the core practice areas, those compulsory modules that we talked about. So again, you're seeing business law and practice, property law and practice. Litigation is now called dispute resolution. Wills, probate and the administration of estate, that's in there. Criminal practice and solicitors' accounts. So those are the functioning legal knowledge subjects that you will need in order to be able to sit the exam for SQE1.
And just to reiterate, there are no specialist practice areas. That's the extent of the course. But of course, what it means is that you're going to have to scrub up your notes on contract law and tort law that you may have studied a year or two previously, or maybe 3 years previously, given the fact that some of these subjects are studied in the first year of an undergraduate degree. Now, what is it about this paper SQE1 which is quite important that we need to explain to students in terms of how it's assessed, Hilary?
So these subjects are assessed by way of multiple choice questions. And in fact, there are 360, let's say it again, 360 multiple choice questions spread over those two papers. So in paper 1, there's 180, and paper 2, there's 180 multiple choice questions. And they are they're not necessarily, it doesn't say we're now going to ask you a number of questions on dispute resolution. They're all mixed up at in a different order, aren't they, Johnny? They're not neatly spread out into sections. So you've got to be mentally agile to keep on top of what the area is that is being examined at that particular point. So the actual examinations are, the standard length is 5 hours in length. So paper 1 is 5 hours, paper 2 is 5 hours, and there is a break in the middle. So you do 2.5 hours, then there's a break and another 2.5 hours. And I think the papers, I'm correct in saying that they're usually 2 or 3 days apart. So you do paper 1, and then there's a couple of days before you will sit paper 2.
So if you've done the maths, it's 1 minute 42 seconds per multiple choice question, which is why we say in round figures, as Hilary says, the exams are sort of 5 hours long for each paper. In fact, it's sort of 2 hours 33 in the morning, 2 hours 33 in the afternoon for paper 1, and then the same again in the afternoon, so that every question has exactly 1 minute 42 seconds. I don't know what the rationale is behind that, but that's what it is. I can see that there's a question here that is probably quite an important question to take now from Demi. Is it possible to do an SQE prep course without doing a conversion course? What do we say there, given the fact that there's all this stuff for you to know? What's our advice on that?
Well, at BPP, we would say that you need to do a conversion course. If you don't have a law degree that covers contract tort, trust, criminal law, land law, English legal system, and constitutional law, those kind of black letter law subjects, if your degree doesn't cover those, then it will be tricky to get the depth of knowledge and understanding that you will need in order to be able to sit that solicitor's qualifying exam. And remember, the SQE, the E stands for examination. So you're right to discuss, what the preparation course. SQE is not a course of study. It is simply an exam, and what you do to get to the point that you are in a position to sit those exams is very, very important, isn't it, Johnny?
Yeah, and one thing is also important is that the cost of the assessments are very expensive, and you don't really want to fail them. The combined cost of SQE1 and SQE2 is over £4,000, and therefore going into the assessments without proper preparation is a recipe for potential disaster. And just to sort of further answer Demi's question, one thing is really important: the top law firms are saying to non-law graduates, do not attempt the SQE without a graduate conversion course. Many of them will insist that you do one, so you get a really solid foundation. However bright you might be, and some, I dare say some students would possibly pass the SQE without a graduate conversion course, but the vast majority will struggle big time or will fail, and you don't want to do that. And another thing to say would be, if you get to a law firm and have passed it without a conversion course, you've probably cut corners there, and the law firm will say, well, if you cut corners with that part of your career which is so important, what sort of corners would you be cutting in practice, and is that the sort of person we want? To be honest, you want to get the best education you can get, so I would strongly recommend you do a graduate conversion course. Okay, Emily said, would you recommend a SQE exam with graduate conversion but without specific SQE preparation courses?
Well, that's the other side of the coin, isn't it, Johnny? Because how are you going to get the knowledge and understanding of the practice areas if you haven't done a SQE preparation course?
Yeah, and there are some courses that BPP do and other providers do that combine a preparation for the SQE, but also beforehand provide you with a graduate conversion course. So a number of providers that are combining the graduate conversion course and SQE1 as a master's, and therefore that's a way you can get funding for, not just your conversion course, but also SQE1. So there are different ways you can do it, and I don't want to get sidetracked too much by that, but I think the important thing to understand is that there are many, many different ways you can prepare. But our advice is don't cut corners, because it's high risk from pass or fail, but also high risk financially as well. So that's SQE1, high stakes, 360 MCQ questions, 5 options for each question. SQE2, so this is the second part. Now, there's a rule about SQE2. What can't you do about SQE2?
Well, yes, I think I mentioned it right at the outset. You need to have passed SQE1 before you can even register for the SQE2 assessment. So it's really important that you know this, that you can only register to sit the second part of the solicitor's qualifying exam once you have passed part 1 of them. And that's really, really important, because you'll see that it combines, there are 16 skills based exams that you are going to sit. 12 of them are written, and 4 of them are oral skills. And as you can just see, that's come up on the slide now, this is the really important bit, that not only does it test the skill, it also tests that functioning legal knowledge from SQE1. So you're assessed 50% on the knowledge of the law that we've just looked at, that whole range of law, those the black letter law and the practice areas as well, and then 50% on the skill that is being assessed at the time. So it's really important, there is a justification for saying you can't sit SQE1 before you've passed, until you have passed SQE. Can't sit SQE2 until you've passed SQE1. So these are skills that are very similar to those that are assessed on the LPC, if you can remember back to one of the previous slides. But the important difference, and this is another key point about the SQE, is that you are assessed at the standard of a newly qualified solicitor, compared with the LPC, where you are assessed at the standard of a trainee. And as you can see there, finally on the screen that's come up, it is a single aggregate pass mark over those 16 separate assessments. So, you take those assessments over 3.5 days. You've got the written skills, and then you've got the oral skills as well. And there are centres where you can sit those. They've come up on the screen as well. So is there anything you want to add to that, Johnny?
I think let's look at question 7, if we could do, from Yulia from Citi, because I think it's a really good question. Sam, if we could just have that on the screen. Question number 7 from Yulia from Citi. Is the SQE harder than the LPC? Now, bearing in mind something we can see on the screen already, Hilary, what would you say?
Is it harder? It's a different, what I would say, that it's very much a different type of assessment. And it goes back to that point, that I've just made, that you are assessed at the standard of a newly qualified solicitor, as opposed to day 1 of a training contract. So the standard at which you are assessed is higher.
Definitely in relation to the skills, there'll be a noticeable difference between the level you have to show in terms of competence with your interviewing skills, your advocacy skills, and your written skills. That'll be a marked difference between the two. So in that sense, the LPC bar is a little bit lower, and it's about the assessment regime. And we've talked about LPC, certainly a BPP is an open book exam, whereas the SQE is a closed book exam. So on that basis, I know a lot of students like the comfort blanket of an open book exam, although it's not everything, because you don't have that much time actually to look stuff up. But some people perceive it to be slightly more straightforward.
Yeah, absolutely. And Hamza's got a good question that sort of ties in with this point about SQE2. So it says, if you pass the LPC and you're struggling to secure a training contract, is it possible to sit only SQE2 and use qualifying work experience to qualify? And the answer to that is yes. absolutely. So if you have done the LPC and you've passed the LPC, then and you wish to convert your LPC to an SQE, then you simply need to take SQE2. You don't need to do part one of the SQE.
Excellent. There's a good question here from Kira as well, at 421. Do I need a conversion course if I'm obtaining an Irish LLB? If it's strictly just on Irish law without any of the, or without all of the foundation modules, then you would need a conversion course. We would say to go to get onto the SQE. There are possibilities for students who've got a strong legal background in another jurisdiction, in Scotland or Ireland, where we do have something called a starter course, where it is possible, if you've got a strong law background in a common law jurisdiction, we will, subject to achieving an assessment in terms of see where you are in terms of the knowledge of core areas, give you the option to do effectively an accelerated law foundations course, a much quicker version, but that's exceptional only for those who've really got a lot of law already. So that might apply to you, Kira, but you might find the benefit of doing a law foundations course anyway, just to get that really solid foundation, not least because it comes up in SQE1 in the level of detail that Hilary mentioned. Lots of really good questions I can see already that are coming up in the chat. We are going to answer probably all the ones I can see so far, but I don't want to spoil things before we get onto the relevant slides. So should we move on now?
Yeah, absolutely. So what do we offer at BPP, Johnny?
Okay, so this is just what BPP offers. So we do an SQE1 Masters, or an SQE Masters. So what we've got a SQE1 preparation course. You will then sit the SQE1 assessments, and these are all central assessments that are sat by everybody nationally, as opposed to the LPC, which are exams set by the individual universities. So everyone does the same SQE exam. So if you start in September 23, sorry, September 22, you would go on and do the SQE1 exam in January or July 23, and you could wrap it up into a postgraduate diploma by adding our SQE2 training, which you would then do the assessment for in October or July 2023 if you started in September 22. So you can see it's an academic year effectively to get through the SQE as a student. Pretty much wherever you go, you can't really do it much quicker because there are only a limited number of exam points during the year at the moment. But you can finance your SQE studies as a master's, which many students do because it accesses student loans company finance of £11,836 this year, and it'll be probably over £12,000 for students starting in September 2023. And what we do is we add extra credits, which is this essentials for practice module, after you've done the SQE assessments, and these deliver a lot of those specialist knowledge areas that we talked about that were missing from the SQE syllabus that currently are in the LPC syllabus, like the elective subjects. So you would have a focus on three practice areas, a deep dive into those practice areas to put you in the position where the top law firms want you to be. And therefore, it puts you really on an equal footing with an LPC graduate in that way. But also we give you enhanced skills training, so things like emotional intelligence, resilience, teamwork, all that sort of stuff that isn't really tested at all in the SQE syllabus, but is really important to law firms in practice. You get a really good grounding in those areas, so you can hit the ground running on day one of your training contract, and learn about the business of law as well, because law is a business, and for future qualified solicitors, associates and partners, you need to know how the business of law works, because hopefully one day you'll be like I was many years ago, a partner in a city law firm, participating and helping to run the business. Now, one thing that we've got in our SQE Masters course here is that we've got this additional module, Essentials for Practice, that is endorsed by the O-shaped lawyer, which is an industry standard now that is effectively the benchmark for all these additional skills that law firms are after. So when we go back to one of the questions in the chat and said, well, will law firms prefer LPC graduates? Well, they won't if you've got something like this. And BPP isn't the only provider out there, and all providers are doing something slightly different. But by doing a much more enhanced course over and above the SQE, you can see you can put yourself on a level playing field with the LPC graduates. But certainly law firms are switching over to the SQE, which we'll look at in a moment with Hilary. But just to re-emphasize that obviously once you've done your master's course, you can do your 2 years QWE, or you could do your qualifying work experience alongside it, or even before you start your SQE. It's really, really flexible in the way that you can qualify.
Yeah, and I think that answers one of the questions that we've had in the chat. So although we depict it in a linear way, actually that qualifying work experience can be done at any point in the journey. So it can be done before SQE1, it can be done between SQE1 and SQE2, it can be done after SQE2. So really, you know, there's a lot of optionality as far as the QWE is concerned.
Yeah, so let's move on and just talk about how have students got on with the SQE. So they're being the first set of results. So the national pass rate was 53% for SQE1. So much lower than most universities. LPC certainly much lower than our LPC pass rates, which are considerably higher than that. Pleased to say that BPP's very small cohorts that have entered so far have got 71.4% of them passing, so it's well above the national pass rate. But it's only a very small cohort of apprentices. What does that really tell us about the courses that to get a really good pass rate? I think it does tell us something, doesn't it, Hilary?
Yeah, no, I think you're right. It really validates. It really validates the courses that we offer at BPP. So our preparation course for SQE1, with those amazing results, it validates what we have, what we offer by way of preparation for that first part of the solicitors qualifying exam.
And we're not trying to sort of big up BPP in any big way here. We're trying to say to you, when you're choosing your provider, whoever it is, always be taking into account, which of these providers are not just going to get me over the line, but which of the providers are going to get me over the line and prepare me for practice. And what you've got to work out is obviously there are a lot of students who aren't getting over the line. Where are those students studying? And take a view on what is the best way for you to get yourself over the SQE line. But obviously, one factor to take into account when you're choosing between the two is that the pass rates of the two pathways are noticeably different. What about the SQE2 results? Well, the national pass rate was 77%. Why would that be much higher than the national pass rate for SQE1, Hilary?
Oh, well, I suspect that's higher because, as I've mentioned several times now, you need to have passed SQE1 before you can register for SQE2. So I suspect that is one of the key factors in having a higher pass rate for part 2 of these exams.
And this is only one set of results. We've had a very small cohort, but all of our students passed, 100% of them, which was fantastic news for us. But again, really validates doing the right course. And there are so many out there that you need to research. If you decide the SQE is for you, or it's decided for you, just make sure you do the right course. Even if it's not with BPP, choose the right course that is going to get you over the line. But also think about, it's not just about passing the SQE, it's about getting you ready for your training contract or qualifying work experience. So what are the firms doing? And this is something that as a theme that's cropped up in the chat. There's quite a lot of news, really. And I think if we were having this talk about a year ago, we'd probably be advising students something slightly differently. But the start dates for the SQE courses that law firms who sponsor students, we've done a survey, and as you probably know, BPP, we have more top law firms sending their students exclusively to us to train as solicitors than anyone else by a considerable margin. And we've got well over 50 law firms who currently train with us. And we surveyed them, and what we can see from the evidence here is that 17% of them, this is the purple area, started their SQE courses this year in 2022. A further 54% will be starting for the first time their SQE courses in September 2023. So that's over 70% by this time next year will have moved over to the SQE. And there's only about 29% represented by the light blue area that haven't yet made a decision. That probably most, if not all, will probably commit to the SQE in 2024. What does that tell us then, Hilary, in terms of that information?
Well, I think it shows that the firms are moving towards the SQE. That is what they are expecting their graduates to have done, and I think that last share of the market, 30.
29%.
29%, sorry, it's a bit small. It was a little bit small for me. That last 29% of the market will it's very, very likely that by 2024, they will no longer be offering training contracts, and they will have embraced the SQE as the way of their expectation that that's what the route that graduates will have gone down.
But
We
it's
can
really
see that
important. Yeah.
we can see that the trend is moving towards that.
And it's really important to emphasize that this is the leading law firms. Is it like
Yeah.
that at the other end of the market where people were looking to apply to small high street firms? What's the position there?
Well, I mean, having spoken, chatted to students and looked at the information on the website, there's still going to be a little bit of optionality post 2024, but then, really, and that's going to be relevant for those of you that are third year LLB students, because you will be, finishing either your LPC or SQE if you go down that route roundabout then. But after that, there's no clear indication, and I suspect that it will be the SQE, that everybody has moved over to the SQE, and that these training contracts will be very few and far between by then.
Yeah, I think by 2025, the LPC
See.
will be significantly reduced in terms of an offering from law schools. Now, that doesn't mean to say if you're an LPC graduate, you're on the shelf.
No.
As Hillary's explained already, there is a way still to qualify down the LPC route, but you have to pass SQE2 and complete 2 years of qualifying work experience if you don't get a training contract. And there are still plenty of firms out there that will take you with an LPC, particularly small firms, because to be honest, most small firms will not care whether you've done the SQE or the LPC. If they want you, they just want you to join them and tick all the boxes so that you can get on a training contract. And whether it's the LPC or the SQE, they'll call your training a training contract or qualifying work experience, depending on what exam you've done. But I think what the larger firms are looking to do is trying to get homogeneity, trying to get cohorts that are similar and have all done the SQE. But there will be some mixed cohorts inevitably over the next few years, because I've spoken to plenty of graduate recruiters, and if you've got an LPC, don't go and think, oh, I've got to go do the SQE now. Apply to the top law firms if you've got an SQE, because you still will be taken on if they like you. They might require you to do SQE2, they might not, but don't think you stand any less chance of getting a training contract with any top law firm, because actually the LPC is still hugely recognized by law firms in terms of the value that it adds. Right, let's move on and talk about the key drivers. Now, I mentioned this a little bit earlier in terms of there are a number of key factors, Hilary, aren't there? And nobody really should be applying them all the same. It's about how you weight these factors that decides whether or not you should go down the LPC or the SQE route.
Yeah, and sorry for talking over you. And
yeah.
just from the questions that have come in, everybody's situation is individual to them. So when we talk about these key drivers, these are just some of the factors that we think you may have to take into consideration. As Johnny said, you will weigh them up, and they will have different weight according to your individual situation. So if we take the first two together, cost and funding options, they are two of the core key drivers. The cost of the course and how you're going to fund the course. And so you've got to remember that the SQE is an exam. And so there are two cost points if you go down that. You have the training, at the preparation course, as well as the examination fee that we've talked about. Whereas if you choose to go down the LPC route, you pay for the whole package in one. So you need to think about, costs and funding, and obviously you need to think about how you're going to fund that, if it's a course, if you're doing the LPC, or if you're doing an SQE preparation course, which is why at BPP we offer both our LPC and SQE as masters versions, so you can unlock that funding should you be eligible to do that. So I think that's really important that you think about those two factors together, the cost and funding options. And just because something it costs less doesn't mean to say that it will get you into the position you need to be in order to pass those centrally set exams. And I don't think we've mentioned this, forgive me, and I don't think it does bear repeating anyway, that the cost of the centrally set exams are over £4,000 for part 1 and part 2 together, and if you fail any part of it, you have to pay the fee again.
Absolutely.
So if you fail part 1, if you fail both parts of part 1, those 2 papers, which I think is about £1,800 at the moment.
1,622 actually.
1,600. Well, you have to pay that if you don't pass both papers, you have to pay that whole amount again to resit, which obviously compared with the LPC, where you're paying for a course and the exams are the assessments are part of it, where there is I don't think a very small resit fee, if any. So
yeah,
that is
nominal
something
one
to
at BP, about £75.
yeah.
So, and it's probably the same at most providers from what I know. So
Yeah.
lots of issues there. Just to unpack one of those and emphasize one of the points that Hilary made. Just because a course is cheap, and it might be £5,000 or £6,000, doesn't mean to say it's affordable. Because if you can't, for a lot of people, funding a course is only possible through government funding through the Student Loans Company, and you will not get one for a non-masters SQE preparation course. So however cheap it is, you're going to have to find the cash or borrow it from another source, which is why the funding options for the masters versions of preparation courses are very attractive to a lot of students. Yes, they're more expensive, but then you're doing longer courses with better content or more content, and therefore it's probably preparing you better for the exams and also better for life and practice.
And if you pass the SQE and our internal assessments, you'll get 2 qualifications for the price of 1. You'll get you'll get an LLM, a Masters in Law, and the SQE as well.
Absolutely. Great. Let's have a look at some of the other factors, which we can go through probably a little quicker, because it's really a question of how you weight them, folks. And one thing I would say is that actually, let's go on to them now. The types of assessments. So very briefly, Hilary, just remind everybody, when you're choosing between the LPC and the SQE, if you've got a choice, sometimes people are quite nervous or prefer one type of assessment. That might tip people over one line or the other. Just top line, what's the difference between the types of assessments?
Variety of assessments on LPC, so courseworks, exams, skills. On the LPC, they are open book. On the SQE, they are all closed book exams.
Okay. And law firms' preferences, well, we've mentioned that already, I think, haven't we, in terms of the top law firms really are preferring the SQE. But if you've got an LPC or are really persuaded that the LPC is for you, don't not apply to these top law firms. Don't think they're beyond your capability to get a training contract or qualifying work experience there. They will still look at you if they like you. But obviously they'll have to make a few adjustments. They might require you to do SQE2, they might not. But don't think that you're pricing yourself out of the market by going for an LPC necessarily. Reputation of the pathway is a bit of a non-issue, I think. It used to be a year or two ago, but it's bedding down the SQE, isn't it, Hilary? It's not been without its controversies and problems, but the fact that so many law firms have now switched over, top law firms, means that there isn't really any issue regarding the pathways.
No,
reputation.
absolutely.
But I suppose it's fair to say that firms still like the LPC and LPC graduates because of that enhanced learning from the electives. So that's still something that law firms do like. Data on providers, there's not very much really out there, is there, Hilary?
No, I mean, we've touched on our data at BPP, but again, this is something that in due course may become more relevant, but at the moment it is quite limited, and therefore, you have to take it all with a pinch of salt and kind of look behind the numbers.
And really go on other drivers rather than any
Yeah.
data. This is quite an important one. Some people, when they're choosing between the LPC and the SQE, we've presented the LPC really as really good career prep because of the focus on specialist practice areas as well. When you compare that or an SQE Masters that has full career prep versus pure test preparation for the SQE, students need to decide between those, and there are conflicting objectives there, aren't there?
Yeah, well, exactly, and it's all about being career ready as opposed to just simply being able to pass the exams. And I think, from our conversations with the firms, they certainly want their graduates to be career ready rather than simply have passed those examinations.
Okay, so we would say whatever side of the fence you're going, if it's LPC or SQE, we would recommend that you do something that has that enhanced learning that gives you a deep dive in specialist practice areas that are possibly areas that you are interested in, or certainly the firms that you're interested in applying to would be interested in. And then we've got the two different training regimes, training contract versus qualifying work experience. Now, this is very different. Hilary, do you just want to explain the difference? If I was to say a training contract is 2 years with one firm, how does qualifying work experience change
Well,
things under the
qualifying
new
work
system?
experience, yeah, sorry, it's 2 years, so it's 24 months of work experience, but the difference, and this is sort of, really an incredibly positive aspect of the new regime, is that you don't have to do it at one place. So you can do it at up to 4 different um, providers, shall I say. You can do it at 4 different places. So you can do it at a law clinic. It can be quasi legal work, provided that it's signed off. It has to be the SRA will confirm if what you've done meets their criteria, but it doesn't have to be done at one place. It can be done, as we've said, in up to 4 places, and that's not for 6 months. It could be 12 months in one place, a month somewhere else, a couple of months here and there. So you can piece together a patchwork of work experience over a 2-year period, and provided that you can get it signed off by a solicitor and the SRA are happy with it, then it will count as qualifying work experience. And looking at the demographic of some of the questions that have come in, it can even be work that has been done abroad, can't it, Johnny?
Yes, absolutely. And it doesn't have to be a continuous 2-year period. You could spend a year. In fact, what a lot of people do is to paralegal for a year after
Mm.
university and use that money that they save to go into the SQE. And I think there's a guy called Zach Gray, I think, on the chat was asking that question. Would you recommend doing work before you go into to do the SQE? Well, that's certainly an option from an affordability point of view. Yeah, some people just prefer to carry on with their education. Pay your money, take your choice. Anyway, I think we've got to move on, but
Yeah.
lots and lots of really good questions coming up that we will endeavour to answer, if not during this part of the presentation, certainly in the networking session at the end. So just the other factors very briefly. So my slides are playing up a bit here. Let's advance them. So timing, this is really a non-issue, but a lot of people think, oh, you can probably do the SQE a bit quicker, and if you're lucky, you might do. But in a career that there might be 30, 35 years, if you can qualify 3 months, even 6 months quicker, does it really matter? Isn't it more important to do the right course for your career aspirations and the type of firm that you're applying to, Hilary?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. You need to think about where you want to work, and it may be slightly quicker to qualify down the SQE route, but ultimately it makes a very marginal difference in a long career, in what I hope you
And
all have a
yeah,
very long career in the
yeah,
law.
and of course, if you have a resit, there aren't that many resit points. Certainly for SQE1, there's only 2 sits a year at the moment, so
Yeah.
you would certainly take probably longer than most LPCs, because we have certainly a BPP in-course resits for our assessments, so you can still be out within 12 months even if you've not passed an exam first time. So timing is really a non-issue. It shouldn't be the thing that drives you. And just for those of you who are working in practice, we'll be showing a case study in the moment that actually answers the question: should you be doing the LPC or SQE if you're working in practice in a paralegal role? So maybe we'll defer to that in a moment. So here we are now going to show you some case studies, and we'll be applying some of these drivers here and putting weighting on them in the way that I think is appropriate for those particular students. But you might want to apply them differently for your own personal circumstances. So let's have a look at case study number 1. So I'm going to read this through slowly because you just need to orientate yourself on the fact pattern. So we've got Ali, who started his LLB in September 2022, so that's just a few months ago. He's got a brother, Bilal, who graduated in history in July 22 and started a conversion course in September 2022. So what would you advise them, LPC or SQE, Hilary?
Well, this is quite an easy one. We've started with an easy one because actually for both Ali and Bilal, they will have to go down the SQE pathway. They have no optionality at all, because law students and non-law students who haven't started their law journey before 2022, generally speaking, are not eligible to qualify down the LPC route. So the only thing really that they've got to think about is what SQE course they are going to take in order to prepare them for those centrally set exams. That will be what I will be saying to Ali and Bilal.
Okay, so that was the easier one. Now the case studies get steadily more complex or difficult for us to give a definitive answer. What about excuse me, case study number 2? And this might apply to a number of you here. So Charlie started their LLB in September 2020, and Charlie graduates in July 23. So just graduates this coming summer. Charlie's got a sister, Danielle, who studied and passed her PGDL between September 21 and July 22, and is currently taking a gap year. They both want to work in a excuse me, in a large corporate firm, and let's assume they've got pretty good academics as well. What would you advise them in those circumstances, Hilary?
Well, based on the conversations we have with the firms and everything, and the timing that these two students are going to be taking the professional part of their law journey, I would say the SQE. I would say that go for the SQE unless, as it said on the slide, there is some overriding reason why to take the LPC, because by the time they actually start doing the on-the-job training, it's more likely that they'll get qualifying work experience rather than a training contract. And as we've seen from the graphic, the pie chart that we showed earlier, more top law firms are moving towards the SQE, and they certainly will have done by the time these two individuals are looking for a training contract or qualifying work experience. And actually, if they are as you've said, Johnny, students with good academics and hoping to work in a large firm, in which case the route will be dictated to them by the firm. So they may not have any option that way anyway. So if they are lucky enough to get sponsorship, then I would that it's likely that the firm will suggest that they go down the SQE route.
But there are plenty of students who don't get sponsorship, and our advice would still be the same. Look at the SQE route, because that would be aligned to the law firm and the law firm's policy of recruitment, almost certainly for these two, by the time they do their SQE assessments. And therefore, it's really important for you, obviously, to check the firm's websites, but almost certainly, if you're going to self-fund, you have the confidence, maybe a good academic background, and you're looking at the larger sort of corporate firms, the SQE is probably going to be the one option that we can probably clearly advise you on, more so than the more difficult examples that are going to follow a little bit later on. So should we have a look at case study number 3?
Yeah.
So Ellie completed her LB in September 21 and has been working as a real estate paralegal in a high street firm. She's been running her own caseload for the last 12 months. And she wants to work her way up, and she really enjoys the role and the people and the real estate work. She wants to stay where she is, doing real estate in her firm. Got 12 months of really good experience behind her amongst her work experience. What would we advise her on here?
Well, Ellie's in a lucky position because she does have a choice. She can either go down the LPC or the SQE route. I would say, having got that, and I think this reflects a few of the questions that we've had in the chat, Johnny, doesn't it? That if you have done some paralegaling and you have got this, then you may be able to convert that into qualifying work experience. So that year that she has done could count 12 months towards that 24-month qualifying work experience, in which case, the SQE would be a really good option for her. Alternatively, because we know what the pass mark is like on the SQE, we know that having simply done real estate work, there will be other areas that she would need to look at for both the LPC and the SQE. So, the pass rates are higher on the LPC. She's got open book exams, certainly at BPP. The cost of the SQE exams, especially if you don't pass the first time, you've got those resit fees. So, there are pros and cons for both the LPC and the SQE.
But I think what Hilary and I agree on, certainly we've spoken about this already, is that most paralegals we're talking to in Ellie's position will choose the SQE route, not least because she's probably banked 12 months of qualifying work experience already. She may possibly be able to get that to count towards her training contract. It's harder though, but not impossible. But it's much easier for this type of work that you do before your studies to count on the new route. And therefore, what we are finding is a lot of paralegals are going down the SQE route just because it gets them qualified quicker. Okay.
And in fact, isn't it true that many of those that took the first iteration of the SQE Part 1 a year ago, many of them were career paralegals?
Yes, absolutely, because they were desperate to qualify, and there wasn't a way that they could use their paralegal work in as easy a way to qualify as it is under the SQE system. Finally, should we have a look at case study 4? Felix is due to graduate with an LLB in summer of 2023. He's hoping for a 2-1, but may end up with a 2-2. He doesn't know what area of law he wants to practice in and is quite flexible as long as he qualifies as a solicitor. So this is somebody who I think will will resonate with a lot of people who are maybe borderline 2-2, 2-1, and know that there are people who are probably going to get maybe slightly higher averages for their degrees. And we know, I'm sure many of you know, that law firms look at the grades you get for individual subjects. So Felix is a little bit concerned about how they're going to get qualified. So what would we advise Felix in this situation?
Well, he can go down either route, so that's okay for him, but he's got to weigh up the pros and cons. I mean, as far as the SQE is concerned, it may be easier for him to get qualifying work experience than it would be to get a training contract. As we've discussed, this whole thing about paralegaling before you actually start your SQE exams, and that can help. If you work for a year or a couple of years before, it can help with the funding of it. Obviously, the disadvantage of the SQE are those pass rates that we've talked about already. With the LPC, it's probably going to be slightly the types of firm that he may wish to apply to are going to be slightly less concerned about the SQE versus the LPC and the work experience that he's got. He could go still probably get a training contract at the type of firm that he may be applying to. So and the LPC may be easier for him to pass. But I suppose the downside is he might not be able to secure the training contract, but if he does the LPC, he can still convert that to an SQE by doing part 2 of those centrally set exams and acquire the qualifying work experience. So he does have a lot of different things to weigh up, and he really needs to think about where he's going to end up in practice and what those type of firms are looking for by way of qualification and experience.
And as we said, if he's quite flexible in terms of what his career journey might look like, you know, and applies to maybe smaller to medium-sized firms who are less concerned, as Hilary says, about SQE or LPC, then maybe the LPC might be better for him. But yeah, he might only want to do the LPC if and when he can bag himself a training contract at one of those firms, just to be sure. But if he wants to get on with his education, then you know, that's a harder call to make, because he won't know for sure whether he's going to get a training contract. But that might be, yeah, the LPC might be the easier route to qualify down, but will he actually get the training contract at the end of the day? That's the million-dollar question. So lots and lots of things to take into account. There are lots of factors to weigh up, and we've just hopefully whetted your appetite on some of the archetype type of students that we, Hilary and I talked to around the country. We've been visiting law fairs up and down the country all term. We've been on websites, on platforms like Legal Cheek, and on our own platforms, talking to students, talking about these issues. And we know that these are, questions that many of you will have asked, as we can see in the chat. We've come around exactly to 5 o'clock. Get us for timing, Hilary. That's amazing. We know that there's a lot of questions there in the chat. We will, and please, by all means, copy and paste into the new room that we're going to go into in a minute your question if we haven't had it answered yet. You will be able to go on screen for us to answer your questions as well. But also, there is an FAQ document that Legal Cheek run that we edit at BPP, answering a lot of the really important frequently asked questions. And there's a lot of really good questions I've seen emerged on the chat here. And we'll take the common themes and we'll get those added to the FAQs on Legal Cheek, insofar as we can't answer them this evening. So there we are. I think clock round exactly to 5 o'clock, Sam. I think we're ready to start exploring all those questions with the students in the networking. We've delivered the session on time.
That's brilliant. Yeah, look at that for timing. So as Johnny said, yeah, definitely check out those SQE FAQs, which we run with BPP. I'll urge a member of my team just to put the link in the chat to that now as well. And obviously we're updating that too, so do keep checking on that. But as Johnny said, we're going to move over to some networking now with Johnny and Hilary. So it's a really good chance. I'd really encourage you to put your video and your audio on and kind of ask your questions face to face in that session too. And that's going to be over in the expo. So for those of you in the audience, that's in the left-hand side of the expo. You see the expo. Once you click that, there'll be a banner for the BPP booth, which you just go into, and we'll resume over there. For Johnny and Hilary in the backstage, it's just the return button on the bottom toolbar now. So if we all head over, just Johnny, Hilary, thank you very much from us at Legal Cheek for your time today, and I'm sure you'll see lots of thank yous coming through in the chat bar too, and for you in the audience as well for attending. I'm sure I'll see many of you at one of our events very, very soon.